All right, when I say medieval philosophy, what pops into your head? For a lot of people, probably not much. For centuries, this whole period has been written off, as this thousand-year detour into dogma and darkness. But what if that story is completely wrong? Let's get into it.
Yeah, the popular story goes something like this. You had the amazing classical world of Plato and Aristotle who gave us reason, and then poof, the lights went out for a millennium, and they stayed out until the Renaissance finally flipped the switch back on. It's this powerful image, right? A vast, empty, intellectual desert.
Well, that's exactly what it is, a myth. And we're here to bust it wide open. The truth is, the medieval period was actually an electrifying age of innovation that literally built the foundations of our modern world. So, our story starts in the rubble of a fallen empire. With Rome gone, the biggest question for the thinkers of the day wasn't just about survival. It was about building a whole new intellectual framework for humanity itself.
See, this wasn't about rejecting the old world. It was a totally radical synthesis. You have guys like Augustine, one of the first great figures of this era, who took the powerful ideas of Plato and tried to fuse them with this new Christian worldview. This wasn't just preserving old ideas, it was forging something brand new, an intellectual foundation for the next 1,000 years.
And you can really see the difference here. The classical world, a lot of the time, saw history as cyclical, just an endless loop, patterns repeating forever. Augustine comes along and says, no, history is a straight line. It has a beginning, a middle, and a divine end. He pictured all of humanity split between these two cities, the earthly one and the heavenly one, and that single idea would shape Western thought for centuries.
Okay, now let's meet Boethius. This guy really embodies the tragic but brilliant transition from the Roman to the medieval world. He was a high-ranking official, unjustly accused of treason and thrown in prison. And facing a truly horrific death, he didn't turn to scripture for comfort. He turned to pure philosophy.
That sounds incredibly stoic, doesn't it? In his final days, Boethius wrote The Consolation of Philosophy, which is this amazing dialogue with Lady Philosophy herself. He argued that real happiness can't depend on things like fortune or wealth or power, because all that can be taken away from you in an instant. No, it can only be found inside, through reason. What a powerful idea from a man who had absolutely nothing left to lose.
So, while Europe was busy piecing itself back together, there was this incredibly vibrant intellectual world flourishing in the Islamic world. And this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. Because the entire future of Western philosophy depended on scholars working in places like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba.
What you're looking at here is one of the greatest intellectual relay races in history. Seriously, a lot of Aristotle's most important works were completely lost to Western Europe, but they were preserved, translated, and studied intensely by Islamic and Jewish thinkers. Then, centuries later, they passed the baton back to Europe, often through Spain, translating the texts from Arabic back into Latin, and it just completely re-energized European thought.
And let's be clear, these weren't just translators. They were philosophical giants. You have Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, a brilliant doctor and philosopher who said he read Aristotle's Metaphysics 40 times before he finally cracked it. Then there's Ibn Rushd, or Averroes, who became known simply as the commentator, because his analysis of Aristotle was just that profound. And Maimonides, who did for Judaism what others were trying to do for Christianity and Islam, merge rational philosophy with revealed faith.
All right, so Europe gets this incredible infusion of rediscovered Greek philosophy, all filtered through the brilliance of Islamic and Jewish commentary. And now it was ready to build something truly monumental. All this new knowledge needed a new home. And so you see these new institutions, like the universities of Paris, Oxford, and Bologna, springing up all over. They became these hotbeds of debate and intellectual rigor, pretty much the forges where a new way of thinking was hammered into shape. And that new method was called scholasticism. Now, this is a super important term. It wasn't a set of beliefs, it was a process. The scholastics believed that through disciplined, logical argument, where you present an idea, you raise all the objections to it, and then you systematically answer them, they could arrive at the truth on just about any topic.
And if scholasticism was building a cathedral of thought, then its master architect was without a doubt Thomas Aquinas. This guy represents the absolute peak of this whole intellectual movement.
Aquinas had this breathtakingly ambitious goal. He wanted to create one single, unified system of knowledge that showed how Aristotle's logic and Christian faith weren't in conflict at all. They were just, two wings that let the human mind soar to truth. His masterpiece, the Summa Theologia, is a testament to that,
tackling thousands of questions with that precise scholastic method. And it's just amazing to think that, as a student, he was so large and quiet that his classmates called him the dumb ox, until his teacher, Albertus Magnus, saw his genius and made that famous prediction.
But, no cathedral, no matter how grand, stands unchallenged forever. Just as Aquinas' incredible synthesis reached its peak, a new generation of thinkers started to ask, hey, can faith and reason really be housed under the same roof? This new challenge came from guys like Duns Scotus and, most famously, William of Ockham. They started to argue that Aquinas' grand project, as amazing as it was flawed. Maybe, they suggested, faith and reason weren't two paths to the same place after all. Maybe they were two totally different domains.
So you've got two camps. Aquinas saw philosophy as the handmaiden of theology, a tool that could help us rationally understand divine truths. But Ockham, he completely disagreed. He argued that philosophy should stick to the natural, observable world, while theology should deal with truths we can only know through faith. You just can't prove them with logic.
And this new focus on logical simplicity led to one of the most famous tools in all of philosophy, Occam's razor. The idea is simple, but revolutionary. Don't make things more complicated than they need to be. When you have multiple explanations for something, the one with the fewest assumptions is probably the right one. And that principle, it would become absolutely fundamental to the development of modern science.
So, when we step back and look at the big picture, we see this isn't an empty desert at all. Not even close. It's a 1,000-year-long conversation stretching from the ashes of Rome through the great intellectual centers of the Islamic world and all the way to the new universities of Europe. Each of these figures built on and argued with the last one.
So, why does any of this matter? Because the world we live in was shaped in this so-called Dark Age. The university system we still have today, that's a medieval invention. The rigorous logic that underpins science and law, it was honed by the scholastics. That fundamental tension between faith and reason that we still talk about, that was the central drama of the medieval mind. They didn't just pass the torch of reason, they made it burn brighter.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The great medieval project was this incredible attempt to build one single, unified system for all truth. And ultimately, it fractured. It failed. But maybe that was the point. Was the separation of philosophy from theology, the very thing that broke that medieval synthesis, the necessary crack in the foundation that allowed modern science and our modern world to be built? Something to think about.